PolitiKnow, getting students in the know about politics.
Your one-stop destination to understanding the federal election and the current political landscape with Reuben, Spargo and Xanthe, Gregory.
We are in day number 15 of the election countdown. That means we have 23 days until we vote.
Welcome back, everybody, to episode number 2 of PolitiKnow.
It's good to be back.
It's great to be back. Let's start off with some good news we've been given this week. So the results are in, and a record 96.8% of eligible voters have enrolled to vote this federal election.
Wow, I think we can draw that back to our post on our social media page, urging young voters to vote.
Now, that is the highest number ever in history,
Wow.
which is very exciting. But the good news keeps coming. Youth enrollment is also at an all-time high.
Wow.
88.8% of 18 to 24-year-olds who are eligible to vote have enrolled.
Well, that's great. That means we can have an accurate outcome this election.
If you're still unsure about who you're going to vote for, there's this great ABC survey called Vote Compass, which basically asks you a bunch of questions about your values, and it places you on the political spectrum.
So we talked about this political spectrum last week. So that's, the left, the right on economic and social issues. I've seen people do this test. I know people have got results back that they didn't expect, which is always quite funny and interesting.
Yeah, some people have not liked the results they've been given that we've seen, but it's always good to see where you sit and get an unbiased view of where you should be voting, which isn't based on your previously held assumptions about who you should and shouldn't vote for, who you think you should vote for based on what your parents vote for.
So, I don't know, if you don't know what the questions are, you can either shoot us a message on our social media or you can do a bit of research yourself. I know I had to for some of the questions. I didn't know what they meant. And it's good to just broaden your knowledge.
Yeah, if you have any questions, we'd love to be able to help answer them next episode.
Alrighty, Xanthe, let's get straight into it. Swing votes. What are swing votes? I've heard people talk about swing votes and swing seats in the media. So tell us a little bit about it.
Well, swing votes are very interesting, and they're usually what the election will come down to. Every seat in each election has a different status that can range from safe to marginal.
Right, and what's safe and marginal?
Well, a safe seat is one where the current candidate received more than 60% of votes in the previous election.
Yeah.
Now, there's another thing called a very safe seat, and that's where the candidate received a significant majority of votes in the previous election, but the seat has also been held for several elections. So that party has held the seat for a long period of time. So it can be safely assumed, although not in all cases, that party will hold on to that seat.
Of course, we've seen recently with the Wentworth by-election, Malcolm Turnbull's old seat. That was believed to be quite a safe Liberal seat, but then we've seen an independent come in and really challenge that perception.
This Calare electorate, which consists of both Bathurst and Orange, is an example of one of the Nationals' very safe seats, because it's been held by the party for the majority of the past century. And going into this election, they hold a margin of more than 11%. But you never know what can happen in an election, especially with so many enrolled voters.
That is it, and we can't trust the polls like we used to be able to. I mean, Donald Trump was never going to become president and Brexit was never going to happen. So I guess the parties just have to keep fighting until D-Day. Now, what is this other seat that you were talking about?
Well, the other seat status is what you'd call a marginal seat. That's where the current candidate received less than 56% of the vote in the previous election. There's another seat status which is classified as fairly safe, and that's where the candidate received between 56 and 60% of votes. But let's stick with marginal seats. These marginal seats are what you would call swing seats.
Okay.
Swing seats are important seats for parties in the upcoming election if they want to hold the majority of seats in the upper house. That's because these are seats where they have the biggest chance of swaying votes away from the current party towards their own. This is where parties tend to throw a lot of campaign money. And this is where elections can be won or lost.
Right, so the parties tend to spend more money in the areas that they know aren't as safe.
Yes, because there's no point spending millions of dollars on a very safe seat when the margin is so large that you might not be able to swing it.
No, you have to buy the hearts and the minds of the undecided voter.
So if there's a margin of, say, 1%, then there's a very high chance that that seat can be swung. So campaign money will be thrown towards it.
So what swing is required for a seat to change hands?
Well, that's anything more than an absolute majority. That's plus of 50%. That's what's required for the seat to change hands. So if a member holds a seat with 56% of the vote, a swing greater than 6% is required for the seat to change hands.
Okay, I've got it. Now, to really hone in on this swing seat business, after the break, we're coming to you with the swing seat of Capricornia in Queensland, which is being hotly contested because of the recent approval of the controversial Adani coal mine. Queensland has some great examples of swing seats where Labor, Liberal, and even the Greens are fighting to take as many as they can. Again, these are what can win and lose the election for parties.
We'll be right back.
Hi there folks, this is Peter Horan. Be sure to get on the rock pile with Alan Taylor. Alternate Saturday mornings, 9 to midday on 2MCE. Finger snapping, hand clapping, foot tapping, hip swivelling, head banging rock from across the decades. If it rocks, you'll hear it on the rock pile. If you hear it on the rock pile, it rocks. It rocks. It rocks.
Alrighty, before that short but sweet break, we were talking about the marginal seat of Capricornia, one of the many swing seats in this upcoming election.
Yes, it's one of the biggest swing seats in Queensland, and it's one of the most controversial ones in the entire country.
Right, so it's currently held by the LNP.
Yes, that's the Liberal National Party of Queensland, and the electorate member is Michelle Landry. Now, it's held by a margin of just 0.6%, so you can see why this seat may swing towards the Labor Party. The electorate is an agricultural and mining region, which has a long history of voting for Labor, but it's currently held by the LNP. The fight here revolves around the coal debate and growing tensions in the Labor Party over the issue of jobs versus the environment. In comes the Adani coal mine.
Yeah, I've been hearing a lot about this Adani coal mine in the media. It's quite controversial. What is it about?
It's one of the most controversial mines to date. There have been debates and delays over its approval, and it's finally been approved after advice from the CSIRO and Geoscience Australia, which gave it the go-ahead. Adani is a coal company which deals with gas, coal and renewable energy in India, Australia and Indonesia. But there are so many coal mines in Australia. Why is this one such a big deal? Well, it's located just inland of the Great Barrier Reef in the Galilee Basin, and the government is planning to spend $2 billion on it. It will be one of the largest export coal mines in the world. Among the growing environmental concerns of the coal mine, the Liberals have agreed to go ahead with it.
Right, so it sounds like it's a fight between the environment and jobs.
Exactly. The Liberal and Labor Party, who both support the mine, they believe that job creation in this electorate is more important than the environment, which is a hard argument to win amid all the climate change policies.
Yeah, especially amongst young people. We've seen from last week that they really care about the environment and climate change.
Exactly right. The Liberals originally suggested that the mine would create 10,000 jobs,
Right.
but when push comes to shove, they're saying it will now only create 1,500 jobs. So their job creation argument doesn't really stand up to all it was made out to be.
Right, and so Labor supports this as well. I've heard Bill Shorten say one thing to a Melbourne audience and another thing to a Queensland audience. What do they specifically say about this mine?
Well, the Labor Party are going the exact same direction as the Coalition are. They're going to continue to go ahead with the approval of the mine. The only party that stands completely against this...
Let me guess. Is it the Greens?
You're right,
Wow.
It is the Greens. So if the Greens get elected, they're going to completely abandon all plans to go ahead with the mine.
Yep.
But if you vote Liberal or Labor, you're really not going to get a very different outcome either way.
Obviously the Greens won't get elected into a full government, but they could have a say if they form a coalition with the Labor Party.
You're right, but with their opposing views, that doesn't seem very possible in this electorate.
Now, something that I don't understand is The Labor Party seems to be the party for really trying to put a stop to climate change and doing all they can for renewable resources and all that. How can they support a coal mine like this?
It seems quite contradictory, doesn't it?
Yeah, I guess young people have to bear that in mind if they decide to vote for Labor for their green energy policies. I mean, how can you export coal so others can burn it and then say that you're trying to do your best to stop climate change?
Exactly, and it does seem to go against everything the Liberal and Labor Party are promising in their climate policies. There was a recent report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which suggested that the use of coal-powered electricity would have to be cut practically to nothing by 2050 to keep global warming at 1.5 degrees. But it doesn't really seem like we're going to be going in the right direction.
It's not stacking up.
It's not stacking up. And those are some concerns with the Liberal and Labor Party's climate policies. Is it just all talk? Another important thing to note about the Adani coal mine is that it also sits among other electorates, which are marginal seats as well. So if support does sway against the Liberal Party for this particular issue, then they may not just be losing one seat. They may be losing multiple.
Yeah, Queensland will certainly be a battleground this election, both Labor and Liberal trying to pick up seats there.
Yeah, exactly right. And now you can see why seats really can swing.
Now, I've just been handed these statistics from a poll that the ABC did on 18 to 24-year-olds. Only 31% will give their first preference to the Liberals or the Nationals. 33% will first preference Labor. 12% will preference the Greens first. And 5% will preference One Nation.
Now, I think those are quite interesting results. There's not really a clear winner out of those.
It's quite tight, especially between the two major parties.
It is. And, I mean, with so much emphasis being put on the climate change policies, I honestly would have thought people would have first preference Greens a bit higher as well.
Well, I'm quite surprised that Labor's percentage wasn't higher there. I mean, you hear all the young people going around talking about Labor. I guess they might be more vocal. I don't know. But it's certainly quite close.
Yeah, there's only a 2% difference there. So, it is definitely going to be a tight race, and we can never tell the outcome. After the break, we're bringing you the latest current affairs in Australian politics. And we'll also be replying to some questions you sent us on social media. So stay tuned.
If you want to keep up to date with us and have your say on what we talk about next episode, just search PolitiKnow on Instagram, Facebook or Twitter. Let us know what you want to hear, and we'll try to keep you in the PolitiKnow. If you've missed anything or just want to listen to this great show again, you can find a podcast of this on our YouTube channel.
Welcome back. Now into current affairs. In the week that was, it was announced that Clive Palmer's candidate in the seat of Warringah wants to preference Tony Abbott, which is a bit of a blow to Zali Steggall. We can get into later how preferences work. This comes around the same time as an incredibly insensitive ad against Tony Abbott, which was made by the activist organisation Get Up, has been pulled. Did you see the ad?
No, I haven't seen the ad. What was it?
Well, I didn't get to see it either because they pulled it down pretty quickly, but I read about it, and what it was Tony Abbott sitting on the beach in his famous budgie smugglers, and I think it goes something along the lines of there was someone who was drowning and he was just sitting there doing nothing.
I mean, I guess the budgie smugglers might be the humorous part, but yes, that's not...
Certainly people drowning is not humorous.
Yes.
But I guess it's just another sign of how an activist organisation like Get Up is getting involved in the race, especially in Warringah, where they aim to knock off conservative politicians.
And Warringah is a seat which has an 11% margin towards the Liberal Party, but it is a
Zali
seat...
Steggall is closing in. She's
An
certainly
independent might actually take that seat, which has a large margin, which would be classified as a safe seat. So seats that you don't expect to swing can also swing.
Yeah, and I guess that's due to sort of climate policies. Now moving on, yesterday as well, the Coalition announced a $63 million veteran spend. So this comes before Anzac Day. And what they've said they're going to spend this money on is wellbeing centres and employment assistance.
We'll see another hiatus like we did on Easter, on Anzac Day, where the politicians take a day off campaigning.
But the cameras certainly don't stop rolling. They are always following the politicians.
And so are we. We're
Yes.
always talking about politics.
Okay, I think we're losing oxygen in this room. Now, Labor has also come out with an announcement. They've pledged stricter rules for skilled worker visas. Now, this crackdown includes measures to limit work visas to areas of genuine skills shortages.
Does that mean Labor is prioritising that Australian workers can fill those skill shortages?
Yeah, I guess they're trying to put Aussies first. Now, they also want to ensure that foreign workers have the right skills and occupational licences. So that's making the work environment safer. Furthermore, in the week that's passed, the Coalition has referred the water buyback debacle to the Auditor General in hope of diffusing the scandal. Now, for people that might not have been keeping up to date with this, there's been a bit of a scandal after a project piece which goes into water buybacks in this country.
Reuben, what are water buybacks?
Well, if you haven't seen the piece by the project, I recommend you go and watch it. It's quite interesting. But historically, there's been over-extraction problems that have badly damaged the river. And with Australia being very dry and a lot of places being in drought at the moment, water is a precious commodity. Essentially, farmers are allocated a certain amount of water from the river system that they can opt to use or sell. Now, the government buys back water entitlements from the farmers, known as buybacks, which reduces the amount of water taken from the river system. The water is then traded on markets and has become an important part of many farming businesses.
There you go.
Now, Xanthe, water trading in the basin is worth about $2 billion each year.
So how's this relevant to the Coalition then?
Now, this is when it starts getting juicy. So the Coalition purchased water from 2 Queensland properties owned by Eastern Australia Agriculture. It appears this money has gone straight to the Cayman Islands. We know what the Cayman Islands means.
What do the Cayman Islands mean?
A tax haven.
That seems a bit dodgy.
Yeah. Now, you're not going to believe this. Energy Minister Angus Taylor co-founded the parent company and directed it until he entered Parliament in 2013. But he denies benefiting from this transaction.
So that's why they've referred it back to the Auditor General.
Yeah, exactly. They want to clear this up. Critics say the deal was poor value for money and will deliver few environmental benefits. Now, can I just add that this was the biggest price paid in Australian history for water. They paid $80 million for 29 gigalitres of water. And I guess the question is, did it fit in line with the procurement policy?
Yeah, ensuring the government and taxpayers get the best value for money.
And that, Xanthe, is the week that was.
You guys have asked us the questions. It's time for us to give you the answers.
That's right, Xanthe. I'm scrolling through my phone now, looking at all the questions. There are certainly some interesting questions here. Now, we're going to try and answer all of them. Now, I'm going to kick us off with Lachlan Green. He wants to know what a few different parties are and what they mean. First, Xanthe, what is the National Party?
Well, the National Party are traditionally representative of graziers, farmers, and rural voters. And they prioritise building stronger regional economies and communities. So, yeah, they really focus on the regional Australia communities.
All right. And what is the LNP?
Well, the LNP is the Liberal National Party of Queensland, and it's not a coalition, which you might get confused about.
So it's a separate party.
It's not solely a Liberal or a National Party. It's actually the combination of both. The parties are not distinct. Instead, they actually act as a permanent coalition.
Okay, and this leads us on to Lachlan's third and final question. What is a coalition?
Good question, Lachlan. The coalition is the alliance of 2 centre-right political parties, that being the Liberal Party and the National Party. They form to make the Liberal National Coalition, which is what holds power now.
So you have the Nationals tend to run in the more rural seats and the Liberals run in the more city seats.
Now we've got another great question from our good friend Sam Groom.
Samuel.
He's asking for those who love to go out and get on the drink and have some fun. Do federal parties have any say on lockouts or pill testing laws?
Now, Samuel, that is a great question, and obviously being a big concern among young people when they voted in the state election. This shouldn't play a role in who you vote for in the federal election because that is a state issue. Now, next question from Ellie Ticehurst. Which party's policies have the greatest focus on benefiting young people and their future?
Well, that really depends on what you value most, Ellie. The Labor Party are being renowned for their strong climate change policies. They have an emissions target reduction of 45% by 2030, and that has been identified as an important issue for young voters. They also have strong education policies. They've promised to remove university caps, which essentially limit the places that are available for students to go to university. They've promised to create 150,000 more apprenticeships in areas with skill shortages. So it really depends what you prioritise there.
Now, the Liberal Party entice young voters by making announcements such as they're going to create 250,000 jobs specifically for young people. So they're really driving the idea of jobs and economy. I don't know if this would really affect young people, but they want to reduce taxes, whereas the Labor Party would increase taxes. The Liberal Party are creating 80,000 more apprenticeships for young people. So they're really thinking more about the economy. So they might be the type of party that you vote for, thinking about your future.
Now, Georgia Hewitt has hit us up and she's asking, who am I voting for and why? Now, we can't really answer this question for you, Georgia. We're just trying to present the facts to you as best as we can to help you make an informed decision.
Yes, Georgia, you're on your own.
Yeah, you're the one holding the pen. You're the one with the right to vote, so it's up to you to decide.
Next question is from Declan Flaherty. How soon will the country go to
Beep.
if the Labor Party wins? Well, I think we know how you're voting this election. I think we might just take that as a comment.
So Ellie Carroll has asked us two important questions. The first question is, where are the marginal and key electorates?
All right, well, let me attack this one first. There are 151 seats up for grabs in this election, but some are more important than others. You'll find the key election seats tend to be ones with small margins, these being swing seats that we discussed earlier. Most elections tend to be decided in Western Sydney, and it looks like Queensland this time round, but there are a lot of marginal seats up for grabs in Victoria this election. So it looks like Victorian voters might have a big say in who will hold office this time round. While New South Wales is likely to see some seats change hands, it seems these swings won't be too significant in the scheme of things. And Queensland, quite a volatile state where swing seats tend to change hands constantly. We're really going to see the issue about the Adani coal mine play up here, and these swings are most likely going to be affected by this. Okay, now fire off question number 2.
Ellie's second question for us is, what will Shorten/ScoMo's downfall be? Well, Ellie, we can't predict the future, and even those who are right on the inside of Australian politics couldn't tell you what's going to happen tomorrow. But there are a few things that we see could impact the leaders in the upcoming election. So let's start with ScoMo. The fact that he wasn't actually voted in as party leader by the Australian people could be one issue impacting voters' decisions. He is the leader on the back of a term of political turmoil within his own party. The fractures and backstabbing seen within the Liberal Party over the past 4 years could be something that may impact his ability to win.
Voters don't forget.
No, they don't. And when it comes to policy, the most obvious example seems to be his party's more conservative approach to climate change. This seems to be one of Labor and the Greens' biggest selling points, especially among young people. And bringing this back to swing states, at least 1 in 3 people have climate change concerns in 9 Liberal seats that are potentially vulnerable in the upcoming election. So that could be quite a concern for the Liberal Party.
Now, Shorten's downfalls might be his popularity as a leader. Some voters can't really relate and they don't find him appealing and engaging. We've seen through the polls that Scott Morrison and Malcolm Turnbull were both consistently approved better as the preferred Prime Minister. Also, something else that I've noticed is Bill Shorten tends to flip and flop on his policies. We saw last week the reporter try and engage in a conversation with him about one of his particular policies and he couldn't answer it. And then, like we've spoken about today, the whole Adani coal mine and his stance on that. He seems to have one answer for the lefties in Melbourne and then have a different answer for the blue-collar workers in Queensland.
Yeah, it can be quite a concern when the leader of the opposition party doesn't necessarily understand his own policies. Thanks for sending us those amazing and interesting questions. We love hearing from you guys, so keep them coming.
And that is it for this week's episode of PolitiKnow.
Yes, that's all we have time for today, but we'll be back at a different time next week. Yeah, we'll be back at 4:20 on Fridays.
Oh, we're moving up in the world.
We're moving up in the world, so be sure to tune in and don't miss us.
I'll see you then, Xanthe.
See you then, Reuben.
Goodbye.